Good evening, and happy Veterans Day. Thank you so very much for joining me this day. I'd like to offer you a disclaimer. I did not fight on the front line with any of the military groups, such as the United States Army or the Air Force or the Navy. However, I was behind the scene as a teacher in support of the military families. But on behalf of my brothers who fought in the Vietnamese War, Edward James Jenkins, Marvin, you fought in World Time term, and they're behind the scene too, and they're exposed to just as much danger as those men and women who fought on the front line. As a matter of fact, civilians can be kidnapped. About the experience of teachers taking assignments to go abroad. And part 2 of that will also be talking about our brand new center and our website that has been designed for family life education. So that will be part 2. But part 1 is to talk to those women who might be in the education field, who might be trainers and developers, training and curriculum specialists, and looking for an avenue because there is a shortage of training and curriculum specialists where the military recruits all over the nation for training and curriculum specialists to go and support the military. I was actually recruited by one of the personnel departments to go abroad to act as a support system to also offer in-house training and development for their staff that were GS7s. As a civilian, I like to tell you about the life of the civilian that nobody ever talks about. But yet, every once in a while, you hear something about a civilian news reporter being held as ransom. I like to tell you that sometimes the lives of the civilians, their stories don't get told. And I am currently experienced while abroad. And I know that most of the military people say, well, those got doggone civilians, which we are separated all the time. But nevertheless, we are the ones that are on the economy. Who I spent most of my time with, but in the story, I will begin to tell you who the real enemy was. And it could also be the enemy from within your own camp. So a number of teachers are still working hard overseas on an assignment for a lifetime assignment. They only get to come home over the summer. Now, you have an option of taking a lifetime assignment, or you have an option of just taking a 3-2 rotation to other countries. And that rotation can go on indefinitely until you retire. So you stay in, those support systems stay in the Army sometimes longer than those soldiers who are out on the line. Now, let me give you a scenario of the lifestyle of the civilians who are not allowed, repeat, they're not allowed to stay in the dormitory on the military base. One of the deals with those various different countries like Germany is that you must bring civilians over to mingle with their people, and they must be able to stay on the economy, so they provide the monies that you need to be able to stay on the economies. In other words, you get a salary for your job, plus you get a housing allowance to stay on the economy. I like to start my story somewhere at a point where you can pretty much be able to zone in on it. As a civilian going over as a GS9, that's a pretty high rank. And when you come over at a GS9, and most of the soldiers are at an E3 or E2, there is sometimes a little jealousy of the fact that you are an administrator and your salary is a lot higher. So therefore, your lifestyle is a lot better. And with the Army giving you the support as an administrator, they will cut a separate check for you to go out and look for housing. That means you can stay in a house and not in a dormitory, which most of the actual soldiers and the privates and those various different men and women, they have to go and stay in those apartments. And if anybody knows how those apartments are, sometimes they're ran down, need a little work, not in best shape. But nevertheless, unless you're a high-ranking officer, you don't get to stay in the housing. But if you are a high-ranking officer, like I was, you get to stay in housing and you live amongst the actual people that you might be at war with. Nevertheless, that is a greater assignment and a more assignment that might be risky. And a lot of times they can't begin to explain to you enough how much your life is in danger when you go abroad and when you're behind the scene. When they do an evacuation, they go to all the concerns where there are military families and wives. They do go to the concern, and like us, they send out an alarm, and if we are not busy and if we can hear that alarm, we know that there's an evacuation. And sometimes, like 9/11, they forgot to evacuate those men and women who were in the economy. There was no one to come and get us. Even saw them scurrying around to get all of the military wives, children, and soldiers in their trucks to get them safety in another location outside of being on the base. However, we were still stuck on the economy. We were on the radio calling all the stations, letting them know that we were civilians and we were behind the scene and we were still on the turf of the Germans. Nevertheless, because of the fact that there would be danger, because there was bunkers, they were hiding out and staying in some of the houses. And we had one bunker approach us about buying our car. He actually came to our home and we said our car is not for sale, but he knew we had to leave sometime soon. He by our house to ask us, would you like to sell your car? And I indicated no, because I wanted no dealings with this bunker because it could be dangerous for us and our family. Nevertheless, my little 12-year-old son, my husband and I we were still on this base, the only Americans on this base, the only Americans, after I had gone to the colonel and asked him to please remove us so that we wouldn't be stuck there when the Germans come. Nevertheless, he had no orders, I had no orders. This case is a national case. It is online where I was denied the orders. It is online for everyone to see. So this is documentation that could back up what I'm saying. Nevertheless, I had to get a congressional hearing in order to get those orders put out by Senator Feingold, who wrote a letter and urged them to actually give me the orders. Now, mind you now, because Senator Feingold was a friend of mine, and at the same time they feared what the senator would do, they gave me the orders. However, by the time they gave me the orders, my husband had already gone under a new contract. So nevertheless, those orders had to be extended. And I was told that I had ample time to get those orders extended and that they would extend them. Someone put them on their desk and left them. And during the time that we were suffering with 9/11, nobody was thinking about renewing the family of the Garth family's orders. Nobody. As a matter of fact, they sat on the desk of somebody and they never got renewed. So by the time they had evacuated the area where we were living, and at that time we were living in Back Kersnar, and it was a different concern. However, I went to the colonel and said, look, we're Americans too. We don't want to be left here. He says, I have nothing to do with your orders. I cannot move you without orders. So therein lies the fact that we ended up staying in this particular town, Back Kersnar. They closed all the grocery stores, closed all of the banks and the postal office. So we had no access to postal office or to the banks. Now, mind you now, here we are wondering, aren't we too an American? And don't we carry IDs where they are responsible for us? But nevertheless, I contacted ministers that were off campus, off the concern. And I told them of the story, and they came to my home. They turned their backs and went away. In the meantime, a mere school teacher who was supporting the military never dreamed that my life and my family's life would be in danger. However, there were bunkers there, and there was only certain times we could leave the house for fear that we might be captured by one of these bunkers. Now, you know what happened during 9/11. You know all of the mischief that was going on. And each time I made a phone call to the United States, there was no way of getting through. No way of getting through. However, prior to that, I called the White House and I explained to them what was going on with my husband's orders and how they were delayed. So we had to depend on my orders in order to return us back to the United States. At that point, the logistics were not issued like they were promised they would be issued, which in detail some orders to return home. They falsely gave my husband the contract without the orders on there to return home. So he had no orders, and his logistic was supposed to, we had to petition the United States Army to overturn that. And nevertheless, it wasn't until I made a phone call to the White House to explain to them that we as civilians were not being assisted, and I feared for my husband and my son's life, and that the logistics that were promised were never given to my husband. Go into the first arbitration that was ever done in the, and through that arbitration, we were able to get his logistics. Other than that, they had left us as if we were not even Americans. And in my opinion, I see that when a civilian goes abroad, you have got to have an additional contract with your own stipulations on there. You cannot depend on the military's contract because civilians so oftentimes get left behind. They might be in the room to testify to this, because when a civilian comes over, they're not treated the same way as the soldiers are. They're almost off on their own to survive. But nevertheless, we support the military for days, upon days, and they left the children with us. So we were a necessity so that the soldiers could go out on the front line and not have to worry about their children. We would sometimes prepare places to keep them overnight or place them in homes. The teachers provided for them. And this story to tell. We brought the individual case and that they would settle with me on the individual case. But why would a teacher have to go through all of these changes to go to support women that are getting ready right now as I speak to make that voyage and that transition, to whole family, to uproot them, to go abroad, to have catastrophic things happen to them while you go abroad? You have to develop your own contract stating that prior to the 90 days of probation, you are covered to be able to be returned home along with your household appliances free of charge. You need to have a contract that says that, because if you don't have a contract to say that, they have one that says contrary to that. And they will tell you that they do not congressional. They can be pressed to give you the orders. However, if you need any adjustments on those orders like we did, they don't or they won't adjust those dates or orders. And they can, no matter how hard you strive to get them, they can lay on somebody's desk unsigned. Yes, on Christmas Day, when we thought we would perish, and no one in town that was an American citizen, we were the only Americans left in this village. When one of my husband's fraternity brothers came by to check on us, he was a soldier, an officer, and a gentleman. He came to check on us to see had we been evacuated, had anybody moved us to safety. He came with bags of groceries, knowing that the weather was bad and that we possibly could not get out to any stores because they were all closed. But nevertheless, he brought grocery bags and a gift for my son on Christmas Day, which he was afraid that nobody would remember his birthday on Christmas Day. However, this gentleman still to this day, at a time when we needed the churches, and after all the commitment that I'd given the church, once they turned their backs, I said, I'll never be a Christian again. That is what prompted me to dismember myself from the Christian organization. Because when you're at a time of distress, you would think that the church would act as an ombudsman or an advocate for you. But that did not happen. Now, I would like to also tell you that I come from a very patriotic family. My brothers encouraged me to go abroad and to take the position my brother James did. And they talked about how honorable it is to serve the country. And I still believe it's honorable to serve your country. Because both of them fought in the Vietnamese War. One was a dog trainer, and both of them encouraged me to be patriotic and support my country. I have supported my country, but I think my country reneged on me. I think they reneged on me because when they found that they had to settle, and they found that they would only just settle with me and not the others, they thought that they would get off easy, but they did not compensate me like they were supposed to. So I say that the military is still beholden to me, and they still owe me an explanation. I was committed to their regime. I worked 10-hour shifts, 4 days on, and 10-hour shifts meant I worked way into the nights, and sometimes alone in large buildings by myself. So I was committed to getting the job done. And they knew that I was one of the best trainers they had, because I was being offered other contracts to go to other places. And that is something that I will always carry in my heart. I will learn to forgive them, but it's only going to be with trial and error. But nevertheless, I still pay homage to my country, because the work I did, it was very important. But I still say that every candidate or potential candidate for a position in the child care department, in the training and curriculum department, must carry their own contract. They simply must carry their own contract. They cannot depend upon the military to preserve their families as well as themselves. Because you could be in another country and find that you have over 18,000 pounds of household goods and you don't know how you're going to ship them back home. You could be in another country and find that has not been signed, will not be signed, and you have no orders for anybody that is a colonel that could pick you up and relocate you to safety. You could be left in the arms of potential dangerous people. But just like I told you, that you might think that the Germans were the corporate, but they were not the corporate. They were not the corporate. It wasn't the Germans. If it wasn't for the Germans, I wouldn't be here today. The Germans came together on my family's behalf, and they took my security deposit out of their German banks and handed it back to me, when that is not getting me marks back, so that we could sustain our tickets to return home. And not only did they do that, they took all of our household goods, because we couldn't leave the country without placing our household goods somewhere and selling our cars. You just cannot get up and leave just like that. You must find out where you're going to place your cars, either sell them or give them away, and put your things in storage if you cannot carry them across the water. The Germans assist us in actually storing all of our things in storage. They had a truck come in, pack our things, and put them in storage. We might not ever see them again, but that's not the point. In order to get on that plane, we had to show proof that we had no more ties to the country and that we had already disposed of all of our household goods and our cars. So they served a great purpose in helping us. And if it wasn't for our landlord, who was also our doctor too, who we kept correspondent with, we would have never made it out. We were physically exhausted. My husband was physically exhausted and beside himself because of the fact that not only had they reneged on me, they had reneged on his logistics as well. So I say to you women that go abroad and use your skills to be a teacher to support the military, it's okay to go abroad. It's a great job. It's a great opportunity to serve your country. a great opportunity to train those young women, to make them prepared to be better certified teachers. It's a great opportunity. Not to mention that some of the women love the job so well that they get on a rotation period where they only come home in the summer and they work year round as a lifetime contract. Now, can you picture being on a lifetime contract when a contract has gone bad? And now here you are on a rotation period going to another continent. Well, I will say that in honor of the military, the fact that they need teachers now, good teachers like myself, they owe me 2 more additional years because I would have rotated because I was up for the chief's job. Not an Indian, but a Bohemian chief. And that's what they feared because I was next in line for the chief's job. Do you think that I cared that I was next in line? I could care less. I just wanted to make sure that my benefits were there and that I was going to be given the support. All of this was in fear that I might be in line to reside over several other white women. They shipped several white women to our department who confiscated all of our jobs. And we were the ones working 10-hour shifts and told that we would be next in line for promotions. Those promotions never came. So that's when we filed a class action suit. But nevertheless, even trying to file all of the cases and settle on that. But they didn't even settle on that like they claimed they would. So I say to the military that this individual and family members who serve your concern well, that in the next lifetime, you will have to go through a drill as to say, why did you not go back and pick that family up? Why did you falsify contractor information? And you will have to answer to the Most High. I can't give you any reprimandum now, but the Most High can. But I can say to those sisters, keep on pushing to become the best at what you're doing, because I was one of the best in child care. That's why I was so selected to go abroad to support the United States Army. They don't just pick any old body. They check your background out and your credentials. And I was thoroughly checked out. You better believe if I was good enough for military, I was good enough for any corporation. So upon going abroad, they knew they had one of the best fudged on their agreement. But I will say on this day, as we honor our patriotic flag and as we honor our military people line, let's say never forget those who are in the background supporting. We're just as important as those who are on the front line. And that's why I was given this hat, because they honored me for working with the military families and ministers to work with them. They honored me to let me know that they had allowed me into the fold, civilian or not. And we must pass laws to get the civilian protected, so when they go abroad, their families are not in a crisis and not in arms danger. And most of the Germans could not believe that the militaries left us with our ID badge, knowing that we're still property of the military. And they cautioned us to give up the property of the United States Army, and they would give us identification cards and they would allow us to stay there. But we said, no, we cannot commit treason against our country. We cannot stay with you. Our place is back home with our country. Even though they've done something wrong, they must pay the price, but we cannot act out of norm by giving up our citizenship, and giving up our ID cards. Now, this spoke to the Germans by saying, if they're willing to walk away and leave the people behind, I'm saying there's a few bad eggs out there. Not all of those soldiers and colonels and majors are bad decision makers, not all of them. But we must remember, when you call a civilian to come to a strange country, you must remember they're living on the economy. They're more subjects to someone holding them hostage than anybody living on the base who's protected by the military with guns. We had no guns. We had no weapons, even though our weapons were not carnal through the pulling down of the stronghold. God held up and preserved us and protected us and sent us an ombudsman person to assist us. This story has been put together on tape so many times, and I've had for so long, and for so long I had to wait till all the anger had left, and I wanted to publish it myself. It's an audio tape of everything that transpired and happened, but we have to the way that a soldier's treated. You might be mistreated, and your family might not be looked after as those men on the front line. But you have to make sure that referendums and bills are passed to assist civilians, to give us protection too, so that we're not just some civilian on the sideline, but someone who is supporting the United States Army or Navy or Air Force, whichever it might be. And we're there for the long haul. Some of us are there for a lifetime. Tell me how many soldiers are over there for a lifetime. Very few. But you can find those support systems in the background there for a lifetime. So these are lifetime commitments of these so-called civilians that you think are doing nothing and that are not at arm's danger. Yes, we are at arm's danger. And it affected my husband so much that he thought that we could be overtaken in the night. And he had no support system, no one to call but the radio station. And the radio station, get us out. It's dangerous being here. We must find a way out. And it wasn't until the Germans came to us and handed us our security deposit and said, you have money now to purchase your own ticket. We have reimbursed you your security deposit. He will always beset me because I brought my family there. And I thought I had brought them in protection of the United States Army. But I could have potentially been leading them to their death in the hands of the enemy. But nevertheless, you are told that civilians are not considered from but their support system. But there must be benefits and services put in place to protect us. In the event that one of us gets stuck in a situation where we are in the danger of the so-called enemy, the so-called enemy turned around and became a friend. And those who I thought would befriend us to assist us, they turned their backs. But the Germans became the real friend. And as I think about that, over 20 years ago, it still burns in my heart today, as if it happened overnight. But if I can help any of you teachers make a difference in your life when you take these assignments abroad, remember to have your lawyer to draw up another addendum on your contract so that you don't ever without the support of the United States Army to return you home. Dorothy needed to go home. And when Dorothy wanted to go home, those papers were not endorsed for me to take them and go abroad. My things are still there at this time. And I think if the military was any type of outfit, they would have located those things and shipped them to assist you. You must offer them protection and you must serve them well, just like all your soldiers. Must the issue of racism continue in the military? So many of the black men had to keep up the V sign. Because this issue isn't over with. It continues. Those women that are still in the military committed, they're still going through racial discrimination, impartiality, the whole bit. We found and discovered through the research there was a nation of women who have been discriminated against. We opened and cracked a case that would have never been cracked open. And we found those women who were discriminated, and men too, that were people of color. And you did not reach out to make things better for them, to change them. You only said that you would do it for one person. And you didn't even do it for that one person. I challenge you today to be an officer and a gentleman, because these type of things cannot go on. I'm intelligent enough to know that it's necessary to put it in the form of a manuscript and to write about it and to talk about it. Not to disclaim any organization, because I still believe in the organization. Not a frontline soldier. I am behind the scene. And a soldier saw that it was necessary to place this helmet on my head because of the work I did for the women abroad there in Hanau, Germany. So I like to say for the record that some of us earn the right to wear the hat. Some of us earn it diligently. And I was one of the ones that earned it because of the work that I did for the military and the commitment I had. Up until the very end, didn't seek to protect my family and I, and to bring us home safely. To bring us home safely. Excuse me. I'd like to say to those women who are thinking about going abroad, get yourself in order with a good attorney, making sure that he can write up everything that will cover you and protect you and your benefits. It's a great opportunity to serve your country. And when you're ever given the time, I would say serve your country. So these are not knockoffs who are there just there temporary, but they're permanently workers, working around, year-round, and supporting the military. Thank you so much for going on that little journey walk with me. Every now and then, every year, I have to tell the story, and this would not be any exception, because it needs to be told and it needs to be reiterated. And part two of the staff of the teachers, that is a teachers and parents. It's a family life center under www or http lilyeducation.weebly.com, and it's listed out on the advertisement there. That website has a number of different things for teachers, and it needs to be utilized. We finally got it all finished, and hopefully you can access the things that are on there. They're free. So in honor of this Veterans Day, the actual website is not going on right now for African Americans. Now just coming to our own, finding out who we are, and knowing that we're now the first indigenous aboriginals. And there needs to be a lot of history and a lot of guidance and facilitating going on to help a lot of people who don't have the knowledge and who are trying to do the research. There needs to be a number of us teachers out there to support these groups so that they can find their lineage, and not looking for their lineage over in Africa, but right here on Turtle Island in the North Americans, so that we can prove our indigenous heritage here. It seems as if everyone wants to beat the African American out of everything they deserve. But all I say that because this accolades of a real soldier. And I say to all of you who are original indigenous people and reconnect yourself to the dolls list, you must find those sites and to them and look at the census site and look up your mothers and your fathers to see if they were non-slave members in this Turtle Island. And you must begin to start a research and putting together websites that would allow your family to go to those sites for the ancestry.com. And don't let anybody fool you. You're not looking for anything over in Africa. They have misled us enough and misleading you over to Africa to tell you that you're African and you're from a tribe. That's a lie. If you're going to find any tribe that you're connected to, find the tribe you're connected to here, because this is where they owe you money for the land and the 40 acres and a mule you can do a lot with. And we've got to press this thing because we're letting far too many people get away with stealing from us. But I did tell you, you're the gods now. You don't have to tolerate it. You can stand up and be a god, because right now there are young people who are discovering information about the fact that we have always been here. They don't know a time when we weren't here. And we always collected as industrial people who were tradesmen, and we are not people that just drifted over from Africa. As a matter of fact, most of us were here, and if they brought any Africans over, there was also tradesmen already here. And we've got to find our lineage as the indigenous Black man and woman that we are. And we don't have to use Black anymore because we know that's outside of the law. So why use a word that's going to self-incriminate us? We have to be very, very cunning this time and coming together to support one another on our effort to do this research. We've got to do the work. They're not going to do it for us. They have printed lies in the history books, and we have had history. Now it's time to have our own story about who we really are. And I know my father from the get-go was a Seminole Indian, because no one would have ever changed his name to Shane unless he was a member of a tribe, which he was, and the Seminole Indians was it, one of the 5 civilized tribes with the creeds. So we've got to find where we belong, because we are lost people. We don't have to be, and we can pick ourselves. We were part of all the points, excuse me, to fight a war, to fight a war. We're never the holiday that the soldiers that went down, they went down. War is not explainable. Some people don't have to go to war, and who is it all for? And sometimes a black man and woman have to go to war, and who is it all for? And sometimes a black man and woman don't get anything out of the wars. And we're the ones left without jobs. And then when the men come home, they're sick and they're alcoholics and they're on drugs and they come home broken without. Well, I refuse my household goods back. God allowed me to start all over again. And He replenished what I have lost. And everything I have lost, I have renewed it. So don't think that it's strange that you can't get everything back. You can get everything back. And those who are sitting around clapping and rallying that you have lost everything, God will never let you, no matter how they try. You must understand the work. So we are the world's indigenous people that He used as a blueprint to create all other societies and humanity. We are man. We are not a kind of man, but we are man. Everybody else is a kind of man, but we are man. And don't forget it. So if things if things don't go well for you in the military, soldiers, and you're having a rough time and you want to get out, I know because you came to my house many times to cry in my arms about how can you get out? What can you do to get out of that man's army? What can you do? If you made a commitment, I say serve your time and serve it wisely and be cunning, because there's much that can happen to you while you're in the military. Much that can happen to you. But if God's hand is not on your life, you can perish. You can actually end up perishing. But God walked and talked with me the whole time. I had the government upon my shoulders when I went in there to speak to those military regimes. But nevertheless, the ancestors walked with me and they supported me. So you ought to call upon your ancestors, Eli, so they can pick you up and lift you up and support you in your time of grief. Now, I thank you so very much that you're going to go out to the website and hopefully you'll take advantage for, if you can't get in up under HTTP, then try the www. And they had changed the name from Lilly Institute for Exceptional Education to Lilly Institute for Education .weebly, WEEBLY.com. But you can go to that site. There's tons of things there. I've been working on that website for over 2 years, and we finally published it, and maybe you can get some benefits from it. But nevertheless, this is my story, and I still acknowledge the military regime, and I say that a lot of changes need to be made. Military, all need to make a difference back home for the people here of color. We have to get in on helping to make referendums and make changes. Don't just keep signing your name to be in the Army. Go in there and sign referendums, and you still then go in there with a degree. And you still then go in there with a degree like I did, and make them have to pay you what you're worth. Because when I went in as a GS9 and a master's degree, they asked me if I wanted to get another master's. I said no. For what? I mean, I'm already a master. So, nevertheless, I want to say to you that you have got to be on top of what is going on with your paperwork of the military. Teachers, when you get your paperwork, make sure that you have a lawyer look over your paperwork, so you make sure that Dorothy can get back home. Dorothy's home now. Thank you. Odavo.